The Healing Fountain. Book 1. If I may but touch the hem of his garment, I shall be healed. These are the words of profound faith in the biblical story in the book of Matthew chapter 9, spoken by the woman who had suffered from a hemorrhage for 12 years. In this episode of The Healing Fountain, we meet the elderly couple who recently purchased their forever home on Tranquility Avenue in the city of Ancaster for the first time. The home had a water feature with a pond shaped like a wishing well. As they were moving in, all the neighbors would drop by to greet and welcome them. Some even hinted that there was something special about the pond. The couple loved the home's location and its layout. From the inception, this lady was fascinated with the water feature and the pond. She would compare it in her mind to the story of the Pool of Bethesda, her favorite Bible story. The Pool of Bethesda story appears in John 5 of the New Testament. The Pool of Bethesda was where sick people gathered in the hope of being cured. The story is about how Jesus healed a man. "Take up your bed and walk," he told the man who was paralyzed and unable to walk for 38 years. This nice lady was very familiar with the Bible's various accounts of healing pools and ponds. Every evening, the lady would sit at her window and read her Bible stories about the healing ponds. She read about the Pool of Bethesda, the Pool of Siloam, the King's Pool, the Pond of Gideon, and the ponds of Heshbon. As she read about their healing qualities, she would reflect on her own pond and marvel at its beauty. The ponds in the Bible, like the ponds of Heshbon, were not like her little pond. They were a source of water supply for the ancient people of that time. It was their only source of water for cooking, washing, cleansing, and drinking. It symbolizes God's provision. One evening, while sitting at the window, the lady noticed a little boy standing in her pond. The boy was standing at the edge of the stone, wishing well, leaning slightly, holding a coin in his hand. He looked like he was about to toss the coin in the fountain. As the boy stood there, a soft fountain glow illuminated his face from below. The illumination seems to come from the nighttime golden setting of this warm, magical atmosphere. As the lady sat, her eyes fixed on the boy, her mouth open in wonder. Then, suddenly, the little boy was surrounded by dozens of softly glowing fireflies floating around. A warm, magical golden glow started to emanate from the pond. The fireflies, light, seems to produce a flashing pattern as they move around the boy's head, almost forming a circle of light. The formation of the pattern was so precise, as if they were communicating with each other as they moved in a circle. The lady sat in amazement, staring at the beautiful glow around the little boy's head. She then began to wonder where the boy came from, for she had not seen him before. As she gazed at the little boy, out of nowhere, a little girl seemed to appear, standing in the pond beside the boy. The little girl was smiling and playing in the water. As she did so, softly glowing fireflies floated around them. The warm, magical golden glow emanating from the wishing well water, with ethereal light drifting upward, enchanted the air. The woman sat, looking at the children with joy in her heart. She stayed there until the night sky appeared, and it became dark outside. From that time on, every evening the woman would take her Bible and sit by the window, waiting to see if the children would appear in her pond. And, like clockwork, as the daylight fell and faded into the cool of the evening, the children would appear. One evening, as the children emerged, the lady had an idea to visit the children in her pond. She wanted to know why they appear every evening, and why in her pond. The lady had great difficulty walking because of her Parkinson's disorder. Her Parkinson's disorder was classified as a neurodegenerative disorder, not a disorder of the muscles or bones themselves. That same evening, the lady chose a light, comfortable dress and a brown cardigan as she prepared to go outside. She had great difficulty dressing as she maneuvered her painful, aching body. She remembered a time when her muscles were not rigid and stiff, and she could move with ease and not lose her balance while walking. This caused her to walk more slowly and take much smaller steps. The lady, who was an avid reader, knew that Parkinson's disorder is a movement disorder of the nervous system caused by the loss of dopamine-producing neurons in the brain. This happens in the substantia nigra and basal ganglia. This neurological degeneration leads to symptoms such as tremors, slowed movement, poor balance, and rigid muscles. So that evening, the lady, wearing her comfortable dress and cardigan, went out and stood in the garden near the bushes, waiting to see if the children would appear. She wanted to see them up close. She had seen many children visiting the pond during the day, however, not in the late evening, just before nightfall. Even though she had great difficulty maneuvering her way to the garden, she found solace standing quietly next to the bushes in her garden. She could sense her connection to the beauty of nature, perhaps seeking comfort in the familiar surroundings. Without fail, as daylight fell, the children appeared. The lady sat there warmly smiling as she watched the children playing in the pool. The soft, magical glow from the wishing well illuminated the scene, the fireflies floating around, enchanting the fairy tale nighttime garden atmosphere. The children seemed very happy. They played together. However, no one spoke. The lady felt that there was something mysterious about these two children. She could not put her finger on what exactly made these children different. As she stood watching the children, they seemed unaware of her presence, almost as if they were in a world of their own. The children appeared to be 7 or 8 years old. They were small in stature. The lady looked straight into their eyes. Their eyes were bright green, with a warm, peaceful, friendly glow about them. Then an idea came to her, and she said to herself, "These children are visiting fairies." The lady knew that fairies were mythical, magical beings. However, the children seemed to fit the description of healing fairies that she had read about a long time ago. The children were different, yes. However, despite their small stature, they seemed just beautiful. The way they moved and played made them appear very wise for their age. Their gentle movement and the rhythm of their hands exhibit that of a butterfly. The lady decided to get their attention. So she called out to them, not certain if they could hear her, as they seemed oblivious to anything around them. The lady said, "Hello, little girl and little boy, what are your names?" The children turned and looked directly into the lady's eyes. As they stared into her eyes, a warm feeling came over the lady's body. The lady felt a sense of holistic restoration wash over her body and mind. Then came a peace and calm, a peace that surpasses understanding. The lady stood in her garden in wonder, unable to process what was happening to her body. All the emotional pain she harbored about not being able to take care of herself as the Parkinson's disorder worsens. The fear of losing her independence, all that anxiety about falling with no one around, all that mental anguish gone. The woman's broken heart was healed. As she allowed this new feeling of peace to penetrate her body, A smile began to form on her face. The wrinkled lines on her face seemed to vanish instantly. She sat down on a nearby garden bench, still trying to make sense of it all. The peace and harmony she felt were new experiences for her. She focused on her hands, and her fingers were no longer painful, and the joints were not swollen with arthritis. She tried opening and closing her fingers, and they were pain-free and moving rapidly with ease. As she sat on the garden bench in wonderment, she must have dozed off to sleep, for when she opened her eyes, it was dark and the children were gone. The lady got up and went inside. Her steps were fluid with no stumbling. That night, as she lay in her bed, she said nothing to her husband. It was too fresh to talk about. She had not gotten her head around what happened in the garden. She shuddered to think what could happen if the word got out that her pond was a healing fountain. She said to herself she would observe and see what happened over the next few days. However, for now, she was going to sleep. Maybe this was just one big dream. The next morning, the lady awoke to the sweet aroma of coffee. Flashes of the past evening immediately rushed into her mind. She lay in her bed, recapping the events of the past evening. She could see the children vividly in her mind, especially those warm green eyes. She looks at her hands, and there are no disjointed joints from arthritis. She did a few leg exercises in her bed with ease, no stiffness or rigidity. She wondered to herself if Parkinson's disorder was no longer an issue for her. She decided then and there that she would speak to her doctor later that week at her appointment. However, for now, she is going to the gazebo to sit with her husband and have a cup of coffee. Well, did you identify the medical condition and the biblical reference in this story? Give us a like and subscribe. Stay tuned for Book 2 coming next.